Dream.
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 He came from the streets of Brazil. No fame, just a dream and a burning will to rise.
In 2013, somewhere in the forgotten corners of Brazil, there was a skinny teenager living in a wooden house that flooded when it rained. He had no money, no plan, and no reason to think life would ever be different. Every day felt the same, another reminder that the world doesn't slow down for people like him. Then, one random year later, he decided to hit the gym, not because he had some vision of becoming a champion. He just needed something to hold on to. But that small choice started to flip his whole life. The gym became his escape, then his purpose, then his battlefield. While others saw broken floors and rusty weights, he saw the one place where effort actually meant something. 7 years later, that same kid, Ramon Queiroz, now Ramon Dino, walked onto the Mr. Olympia stage. The lights were blinding, the crowd roaring, and somehow, the boy who once had nothing was standing next to the best in the world. How did he get there? How did a poor kid from Acre go from flooded streets to the biggest stage in bodybuilding? What kept him going when everything told him to stop? This is the story of Ramon Dino, a man who built his life from the ground up, piece by piece, until the world had no choice but to look his way. Ramon Queiroz was born on February 9, 1995 in Acre, Brazil, a quiet region surrounded by thick forests and long roads that led nowhere fast. His family lived with very little. After his parents separated, he grew up mostly with his father, a hard-working and deeply religious man raising 4 sons on limited means. Ramon was the youngest, quiet and observant, moving between relatives, trying to find where he fit in. His father spent most of his time working, and Ramon watched that effort closely. It stayed with him, the image of someone doing everything possible to hold a family together. Acre wasn't an easy place for young people. Work was scarce, and distractions were everywhere. Sports became a safer space. Ramon played football on rough streets, scraping his feet on the asphalt, but not caring much about the pain. It was one of the few things that made him feel steady. He also liked to write and rap, keeping his thoughts somewhere between rhythm and reflection. At home, money was always tight. A gym membership wasn't possible, so he began working out at the park near his neighborhood. He used whatever he could find: bars, benches, playground frames. That's where he learned calisthenics. He didn't have a coach or a plan. Over time, the movement started to give him something structure never did. He began to notice small changes: his strength, his focus, and the quiet that came with both. One day, while training, a local bodybuilder named Marcio Garcia saw him and stopped to watch. He asked if Ramon trained with weights, and Ramon said no. Marcio could tell he had potential. He encouraged him to compete, and Ramon agreed, and they started training.
Who discovered you, man?
I was at the square doing my exercises and stuff, and I met my first coach, Marcio Garcia.
Every morning, Marcio would pick him up on his old motorcycle and take him to the gym. On the days Marcio couldn't, Ramon walked miles under the heat, pockets empty except for a one-way bus ticket. But somehow, they kept going, 2 guys training with borrowed weights, chasing something invisible. When Marcio found out about a local competition in Porto, he wanted Ramon to join. Neither had money to travel or register, but Marcio hustled, found small sponsors, enough for food and a ride. Most people take years of lifting before stepping on stage. Ramon barely had months. Yet the moment he posed, everyone saw it. The structure, the flow, the kind of muscle symmetry that looks like it's been sculpted for years. He was still living with his father, working shifts at a supermarket, buying his own eggs and rice. That was his version of a meal plan. And still, he shocked everyone on the stage. First show, first win. A nobody from a flooded house had just beaten guys who'd trained their whole lives. But after the show, Marzio fell ill, and then Ramon had to continue alone. Again, he had no coach, no plan, but he still had that same fire. The following year, he did it again, became the best amateur bodybuilder in Brazil, and earned a chance to compete at the 2018 Amateur Olympia. That prep broke him down. No sponsors, no steady income. He ate rice for carbs, eggs for protein, every single day, the same two foods. But the gym was the only place where his life made sense. Each rep felt like it was building something real, something that didn't depend on money or luck. And when the lights hit him on that Olympia stage, it all paid off. He crushed the lineup and earned his pro card at just 23. Still, he did not get the attention he deserved. The same hunger stayed. For 3 years, he didn't compete again. He worked small jobs, thought about quitting, wondered if the dream was even worth it anymore. And just when it looked like the story was closing, fate decided otherwise. In 2020, a fitness creator named Tiago Toguru launched a reality show, Mansão Maromba, a kind of content house for lifters and influencers. Ramon didn't fit the influencer mold, but he got the invite. He almost didn't go. He thought if it failed, he'd just go back home and work in a store again. He packed his bags anyway, and with no backup plan, just that same belief that had carried him since the days of walking to the gym in torn shoes. He reached São Paulo with dreams in his eyes, and São Paulo felt like another planet. The noise, the scale, the unfamiliar faces, it all hit him at once. For the first time, the silence of his small town was replaced by the hum of a city that didn't care who he was. He didn't know anyone. He barely had money to eat. Some nights, he'd call home just to hear a familiar voice and remind himself why he left in the first place. He wanted to do something for his family, but he was still a nobody, and no one really knew his name. What he did not know was that millions were about to. The project he joined, Mansão Maromba, was about to give him a platform bigger than any stage he'd ever stood on. Inside the mansion, something unexpected happened. Between the cameras and daily grind, he found what he'd been missing all along: connection. That's where he met Vitória Viana, the woman who'd later become his wife, the anchor through every prep and storm that came after. But the biggest turning point came when he met Renato Cariani. If Brazil had a Mount Rushmore of fitness, Renato's face would be on it. He saw something raw in Ramon, a spark that reminded him of the old-school legends like Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler. Back when bodybuilding wasn't about followers or brand deals, it was about discipline, pain, and pride. Under Renato's guidance, Ramon rebuilt himself. Day after day, they trained like it was war. The focus was form. In 2021, after years of grinding in silence, Ramon stepped back on stage at the IFBB Europe Pro. He didn't win, but he didn't need to. That second-place finish wasn't a loss, it was a signal. A reminder that the kid from Acre was no longer invisible. That night, the path to Mr. Olympia opened. And just days before the biggest show of his life, he got the kind of news that changes a man forever. He became a father, a son named Ravi. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. A new life waiting at home, a new legacy waiting to begin. When he boarded that plane to America, he was running on barely any sleep, carrying the same backpack he'd used since his teenage years. His coach, Chris Aceto, later said he survived the final days of prep eating airport food. No one else would have stepped on stage after that, but he did, being calm, centered, like a man who already knew what it took to fight for everything he had. When they finally called his name next to Chris Bumstead, the crowd lost it. It wasn't just another comparison. It was the passing of a torch. The world had found its next icon. The boy who once watched floodwater rise through his wooden house was now standing under the lights of Mr. Olympia, shoulder to shoulder with the champion himself. He placed fifth that year, but placement didn't matter. What mattered was that a new era had started.
Legal. O Vitor PSZ perguntou: como foi receber o título de top 5 do mundo?
Cara, para mim foi uma realização, né, já de ter chegado na Olympia, uma realização de ter me classificado entre os 5 melhores, e para mim foi um presente de Deus também, porque era tudo que eu pedia, era para mim pelo menos ser visto na Olympia, e graças a Deus isso aconteceu. A quinta colocação para mim é uma colocação boa também, porque ali aparecem os 5 melhores, então a gente estava entre os 5 melhores.
Everybody knew at this time that bodybuilding had just found its next frontier. For years, fans had looked back to the golden eras, Arnold's symmetry, Zane's artistry, Coleman's raw size, wondering if the sport would ever see that same spark again. Then came Ramon Dino, a physique that blended old-school shape with new-age sharpness, and people noticed. The world wanted to know who this kid from Acre was, how he'd come out of nowhere and stood toe-to-toe with the best on earth. Suddenly, stages that once felt untouchable were calling his name. Just months later, he was on a plane to Ohio for the Arnold Classic, the same show that built legends like Flex Wheeler, Jay Cutler, and Branch Warren. The difference, they came with sponsors, coaches, and full prep teams. Ramon arrived with hunger. He walked into that arena and took second place, behind Terrence Ruffin, but ahead of former Olympia champion Breon Ansley. And that made the entire industry take notice. Ramon wasn't just promising anymore, he was a problem. Then came Olympia 2022, the test that separates dreamers from the elite. Chris Bumstead made weight like clockwork, calm and dialed in. Ramon, on the other hand, faced a different battle. His off-season weight had climbed to around 254 pounds, but the classic physique limit capped him at 222. That meant cutting over 30 pounds in days. His coach locked him in a heated room, pushing his body past the edge just to make the scale. No air conditioning, no rest, just sweat and silence. For anyone who's ever prepped for a show, you know that kind of dehydration feels like dying on purpose. But when Ramon stepped under those lights, he didn't look broken, he looked carved from stone. The improvements were undeniable. A thicker back, fuller legs, and a cleaner vacuum pose that drew cheers every time he hit it. Even Bumstead looked over mid-pose to show his respect. That comparison, side by side, reminded fans of the best rivalries the sport ever had: Arnold versus Sergio, Jay versus Ronnie, Dorian versus Flex. The difference was, this one was streaming live to millions. Ramon didn't win that night. Chris took his 4th title. But the audience could already feel it. Something was coming. Because the kid from Acre wasn't just chasing gold anymore. He was chasing legacy. And soon, the chase started to pay off. The following months turned into non-stop training, long sessions fueled by instant coffee, cold chicken, and that quiet rage only bodybuilders understand. The kind that comes from knowing you were inches away from something bigger. When Ramon showed up at the Arnold Classic, people didn't expect much. They thought the Olympia had been a lucky break, a flash of hype. But once he stepped on stage, all the noise stopped. His lines were cleaner, his waist tighter, his confidence undeniable. He faced Terrence Ruffin again, the master of posing, and Breon Ansley, the former king of the division. But this time, Ramon looked like he had evolved, like his body had learned the language of champions. He placed second, losing only to Ruffin, but the real story was how he had beaten Breon. That was a huge moment. From that point, his name didn't just appear in comment sections or fitness pages, it started trending in gyms. His physique reminded people of what bodybuilding was supposed to look like. Not bloated, not oversized, just aesthetic perfection with the density of the old school greats. Fans started comparing his shape to Frank Zane's balance, his frame to Lee Labrada's, and his legs to Tom Platz's. That's how complete he looked. He trained harder, leaner, smarter. The next Arnold Classic was around the corner now, and it was his mission to give his best. Standing under the bronze statue of Arnold himself, he remembered the boy who once trained barefoot in the rain. The crowd roared as he walked on stage, and this time, he didn't leave room for doubt. His posing was crisp, his physique unmatched, and when the final call-outs came down to him and Urs Kalasinski, there was no hesitation in the judges' eyes. Ramon Dino was the absolute champion. For the first time in history, a Brazilian had won the Arnold Classic. Arnold himself handed him the trophy, smiling as he said, "This is what bodybuilding's all about." Even Chris Bumstead, his biggest rival, couldn't hide his admiration. He said, "If I could look like anyone in the world, I'd look like Ramon." And just like that, two competitors became brothers. Chris flew to Brazil. They trained together, laughed through the language barrier, and built a friendship that reminded everyone what bodybuilding used to be about: respect, rivalry, and growth. But the stage doesn't wait for friendships, because when Olympia season came around again, the two would have to face each other once more. Olympia 2023 felt different from the start. The build-up wasn't just about titles anymore. It was personal, emotional, almost spiritual. Chris Bumstead had torn his lat weeks before the show. Nobody knew how serious it was, but every training clip hinted at pain hidden behind focus. Ramon, on the other hand, was having the best prep of his life. Everything was cleaner. His symmetry had leveled up. His back had finally caught up. Brazil was on fire for him. Every gym, every kid with a dream, every fan praying that this would be his year. When he stepped on stage, it felt like the sport had frozen for a second. The lights hit him like a revelation, dry, detailed, carved from the grind. And yet, across the stage, Chris still carried that unshakable presence. The crowd split in half. The judges' eyes moved fast. Then came the final call-out: Chris, Ramon, head-to-head. It was history repeating itself, but rewritten. For the first time, it wasn't clear who would win. Chris had the conditioning. Ramon had the shape. You could feel it. That edge of your seat silence where every fan holds their breath because it's too close. When they called Chris's name for first place, the room erupted, but not everyone was cheering. Even fans of Bumstead knew Dino had made it a war. He didn't walk off defeated, he walked off respected. Because that night, everyone watching knew it was only a matter of time. Back home, Ramon didn't break. He rebuilt. He stopped posting for a while. No interviews, no noise. Just training quiet, disciplined, ruthless. His physique grew in silence, shaped by repetition and self-belief. His wife, his team, his country, everyone saw the focus. By mid-2025, when he announced his return for Olympia, the energy online was insane. People said he looked untouchable, bigger yet sharper, like he'd unlocked a new version of himself. Even Chris admitted in an interview, "If he shows up the way he looks right now, I might be in trouble." Then came Olympia weekend. Las Vegas, lights, cameras, chaos. When Ramon stepped out, it was game over. Every pose was a statement. His legs had the density of granite, his waist tighter than ever, his back fuller, his confidence unshakable. The work had spoken for itself. The judges took longer than usual. Fans online were losing their minds. Brazil held its breath. Then the voice came over the mic, and the 2025 Classic Physique Olympia champion, Ramon Dino. The arena exploded. The crowd screamed in Portuguese. Grown men cried. Ramon dropped to his knees, his hands covering his face. Years of struggle, loss, poverty, self-doubt, all of it collapsed into that single moment. Chris walked over, hugged him, and raised his hand high. There was no rivalry left, just respect. That photo, Dino holding the Sandow trophy, eyes closed, tears falling, went viral within minutes. Not because it was flashy, but because everyone felt it. This guy changed the story, from a skinny kid training barefoot in Acre to the best in the world. You don't have to be born great to become it.